What's going on, family? This is Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I want to talk about why Mike Tyson was the hottest name in boxing in 1985. Well, let's talk about it. Mike Tyson turned professional in 1985 against a journeyman by the name of Hector Mercedes. Now, I knew who Hector Mercedes was because I followed boxing quite closely. But a lot of people didn't quite know who Mike Tyson was. I knew who he was since 1983. I knew him personally. You see, Mike Tyson had won the Empire State Games and the National Golden Gloves. He was a hot commodity in the amateurs. And he was such a prospect as an amateur that he tried out for the 1984 Los Angeles Games. Now, he had quite a team around him. He had Custy Amato, who was his trainer. And he also had Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton. Now, they had Edwin El Chapo Rosario. But they wanted a big megastar. So they joined in the team. And he began to manage Mike Tyson. But they said they had to, because of his height and his boxing style, package him in such a way where he would be something to look at. So they did something what I call early media. They videotaped all of his fights, and they packaged it into a VHS cassette and sent it all around the country to all the sports writers. And this was as amateur. It was such a way that most people didn't quite understand this. This is a new technique. So they wanted to see him on the Olympic team. But the problem with Mike Tyson, Los Angeles Games, what became a problem for most of the fighters and managers at that time. Because Henry Tillman was a heavyweight that fought out of Los Angeles. And that's what the problem was with Mike Tyson and his team. They did not want to be shafted. Because Henry Tillman was a boxer, and that's usually what you look for to be on a team because you score points in the amateurs. It's not all about knockouts. And Mike Tyson really wasn't a boxer. He was a slug master, if you will. So they moved him up to the super heavyweight division. But out of Philadelphia, you had Tyrell Biggs. He was also a boxer. He reminded a lot of Muhammad Ali. So they have Mike Tyson going up and down, super heavyweight to heavyweight. You had Keneal Odom and others that could be a threat. So Mike Tyson had to wind up going back down to the heavyweight division. And he would face Henry Tillman. He would lose to Henry Tillman. He did not make that team. So he turned professional in 1985. What I want to do right now is I want to go to the ranking system in 1986. And I want to see why Mike Tyson was ranked number 20 and Trevor Berbick was ranked number 1. And in 1 year, he got that fight with Trevor Berbick and became the heavyweight champion of the world. Let's take a look at the ranking system in 1986. Now, Mike Tyson, the legacy of Custy Amato. And Custy Amato was a trainer to Mike Tyson. He was a living legend. He was a trainer to Floyd Patterson, Jose Torres, Willie Pastrana. And he made them all champions. And he could take Mike Tyson to the highest point from the lowest point. Because he understood that way of life. As I said, Mike Tyson was an amateur star. What I want to do now is I want to take a look to see why Mike Tyson was ranked number 20. Trevor Berbick was ranked number 1 in 1986. And in 1 year, Mike Tyson wound up fighting Trevor Berbick for the WBC Heavyweight Championship belt. Let's see how that could possibly happen. Now, what we're going to do is look at the rating system for April 10th of 1986 of the Ring magazine. And the WBA, WBC, and the IBF sanctioning bodies had approved this ranking system. Now, this is in the heavyweight division. Now, it says here, Michael Spinks, was the world champion. He was not. He was the IBF heavyweight champion when he defeated Larry Holmes 1985 to 1986. But for sake of argument, we're just going to go ahead and go down the line of these ranking systems. Now, Michael Spinks was from St. Louis, Missouri. Like I said, he defeated Larry Holmes in 1985 and 1986. Trevor Berbick was from Canada. He was originally from Jamaica. He was ranked number 1. Now, how he got into this ranking system, Trevor Berbick had faced Muhammad Ali in 1981. It was in the Bahamas. They call it Yama Bahama. And he would defeat Muhammad Ali and he would retire him. So there was some kind of promise made, and Don King was supposed to get Trevor Berbick. Well, he sent him through Canada. He made it through here. I'll just leave it that way. So number 2 was Larry Holmes from Eastern Pennsylvania. And, a lot of people thought that Larry Holmes was robbed in that fight. It is what it is. Boxing never ceased to amaze me. He's ranked number 2. That's how he got his ranking down to number 2. Trevor Berbick made it to number 1. I couldn't tell you how, but that's what happened. Number 3, you had Tim Witherspoon. Number 4, Pinklin Thomas. 5, you had Tony Tubbs. 6, you had James Smith. They called him the Bone Crusher. Number 7 was Frank Bruno, who was from England. Number 8, you had James Buster Douglas, Columbus, Ohio. Number 9 was Mike Weaver. He was from California. And number 10, you had Carl Truth Williams. He was from Yonkers, New York. Now, I'll go through Carl Truth Williams for a moment. I want to mention him for a moment. But from ranking number 11 to ranking 14, you had David Bay, who was from Philadelphia. He was number 12, you had Greg Page. He was from Louisville, Kentucky. 13, RIP to him, by the way. 13, you had Marvis Frazier from Philadelphia. 14, James Broad. Number 15, you had Jerry Corsier. I'm trying to focus this lens here, excuse me. He was from South Africa. Number 16, you had Tony Tucker. 17, Tyrell Biggs out of Philadelphia. 18, you had Eddie Gregg. 19 was Mitch Blood Green. He was from Queens. And number 20, you had Mike Tyson. He was originally from Brownsville, Brooklyn. And he relocated to Catskill Mountains. Now, Mike Tyson was from, as I said, Brownsville, Brooklyn. And I knew that area very well. My dad, he was from East New York, right off of Pennsylvania Avenue, near Pink Houses. And Brownsville, Brooklyn is not too far from East New York. And I used to hang out in those in that park that Mike Tyson used to hang out in. The projects over there were Van Dyke projects. And it was a pretty rough area. Pretty rough area. I know a lot of the guys there. And Mike Tyson left at the age of 12. And, he wound up becoming an amateur star. But that's not the thing. The thing is, Mike Tyson is ranked number 20. And Trevor Berbick, who he's going to fight for the WBC Heavyweight Championship belt, is ranked number 1. Now, this is in 1986 when Mike Tyson won the title. And he's 19 guys between Trevor Berbick. Remember, Michael Spinks is the heavyweight champion. Now, what had happened, HBO developed a tournament between Don King and Butch Lewis. Now, Butch Lewis was the promoter and / manager to Michael Spinks. He had Butch Lewis Productions. And Don King, he was a promoter, as you know, as well. So they got together because Butch Lewis was a manager and a promoter of Michael Spinks. He had to do business with Don King. So they decided to develop a tournament because Don King owned a lot of these guys a lot of favors. Tim Witherspoon was trying to get out of the contract with Don King. Trevor Berbick still, he was promised something and Don King is trying to deliver in another way. Larry Holmes felt as though he was cheated and he didn't like it and all kind of lawsuits were going to be filed, so he was ranked number 2. Then you had Pinklin Thomas. Now, Pinklin Thomas is who Trevor Berbick defeated for the heavyweight championship belt. Pinklin Thomas was a very good heavyweight. He was a very, very good heavyweight coming up. As you can see here, all knockouts. Very strong. But he got caught up in the saga there and, things took a turn. But he was the WBC champion and he wound up fighting Trevor Berbick. And he would lose his belt to Trevor Berbick. And Pinklin Thomas, he carried that belt well. He was very proud. He used to go back to Newark, New Jersey. And he would show his belt off. And it's just unfortunate for him. He ran into that spider web. And he lost his title to Trevor Berbick. And that's how Trevor Berbick became the WBC heavyweight champion. Now here you have Trevor Berbick to your left and Pinklin Thomas to your right. Excuse the glare here. I just want to see you to see exactly what this looked like. Okay, let's take a look at Mike Tyson and a cowboy by the name of James Quick Tillis, because that's where he began having his problems. Now here you have James Quick Tillis. He was a veteran heavyweight. And at this point in his career, he wasn't quite serious about boxing. He was just still in it for the money, and he owed a couple of fights to Don King. And it was a perfect segue for Mike Tyson to find his way in that HBO tournament. Because the loophole in that contract, Butch Lewis put a little loophole in the contract. He wanted Michael Spinks to have the ability to jump in and out of that tournament as he saw fit. So Don King turned around and said, well, wait a minute. If that's what's going to happen for him, then that has to happen for me. So that's what Don King began to do. He started shuffling the deck. And first you will see a guy ranked number 1, and then you'll see him ranked number 4. And then you'll see a guy ranked number 8, number 2. And this thing was going on over and over again. And Don King saw Mike Tyson as a future to his bank account. So he wanted to make sure that Mike Tyson was able to jump into the tournament. So Bill Caton and Jim Jacobs matched up Mike Tyson with James Quick Tillis. And they thought it would be a good opportunity for Mike Tyson to show his skills and to show that he belonged in that tournament. And it kind of backfired because James Quick Tillis was a veteran. And he knew how to frustrate Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson had never gone the distance before. Now, he's been 10 rounds, but he's never gone the actual distance before. And you can start seeing some frustration in Mike Tyson's face. And what's interesting is this article right here. Mike Tyson goes the distance. Was it an education or an indication? And what they mean by that is this something in Mike Tyson that's showing a flaw? He's not the guy that we think he is. Now, this is a scene here that's showing Mike Tyson slip underneath the wild left hook of James Quick Tillis. Mike Tyson pivots, spins around, and catches Quick Tillis with his own left hook, and he drops him. It wasn't enough to hurt him, but it was enough just to knock off his equilibrium. And a veteran that James Quick Tillis was, he was able to get up, continue the fight, and go the distance. James Quick Tillis was a veteran of many years. He's been in there with greats, and he knew how to handle himself in that ring. So here you have another article of Mike Tyson. And this was going on in all the newspapers. For the first time in his professional career, Mike Tyson has been taken to the distance. Was it a learning experience, or was it an indication that he may not be as good as we believe? And it started to hurt Bill Caton and Jim Jacobs. But it did Don King justice, because it would allow Mike Tyson to get into the tournament, because the fighters up there would now think they had a shot at an undefeated heavyweight who was in sanction at that time. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of James Quick Tillis and Mike Tyson. Now, before Mike Tyson would face James Quick Tillis, he'd be in the ring with a fighter by the name of Jesse Ferguson. Jesse Ferguson today lives in Willingboro, New Jersey. He works as a park department. But he was a very good fighter at that time. He turned up to become a journeyman. And he was a perfect fighter for Mike Tyson, because this fight was Mike Tyson's professional debut on television network. And I believe it was in Troy, New York. I can't quite remember. I was at that fight. And I remember Mike Tyson starting out very quickly. And I thought this would be interesting because I knew who Jesse Ferguson was. He was very tough. He had a lot of experience at that time. And Mike Tyson was trying to prove a point. But we didn't know at that time that Mike Tyson had bronchitis. And he was breathing quite heavily, from my understanding, coming out of the locker room. They thought it was anxiety. But it was, he was suffering from bronchitis. So he was in the ring with Jesse Ferguson. And as you can see here, a vicious uppercut was thrown. The nose had been broken of Jesse Ferguson. Let me take you back to this photo here. This is the setup punch. Mike Tyson would turn southpaw when he would deliver that punch earlier on in his career. And he would state in an interview with Jim Lampley later on, he would say that his objective was to drive the nose bone into the brain of Jesse Ferguson. Now, he caught a lot of flack from that, but he developed a tremendous amount of street cred because this is what all of us wanted to hear. We didn't have a fighter like that coming up. And we can identify with Mike Tyson. He had the gold tooth, he had the fade haircut, and he was from Brooklyn. In my case, I could relate to him. And we were very excited because we had a new heavyweight that we can look forward to seeing and following. So what I'm showing you is the Mike Tyson scrapbook. I have 3 scrapbooks of Mike Tyson. And covers his entire career, including his amateur career. I'm just showing you, in fact, let me just show you this picture here. This is Jesse Ferguson and Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson had Jesse Ferguson against the ropes the majority of the time. As you can see, he has him on the heels of his back foot. But Jesse Ferguson, I tell you, he was jabbing, let me show you this picture. He was jabbing Mike Tyson half to death with that jab. And he was popping his head back. Mike Tyson had good head movement, but his timing was off. And it was due to the bronchitis. But he prevailed, and he wound up winning that fight. And that fight was about to go the distance, if I believe I'm correct. So now Mike Tyson wound up fighting James Quick Tillis, as we showed. And right after that fight, he went the distance with that fight, but then he fought Mitch Blood Green. And I was at that fight at Madison Square Garden. Mike Tyson went the distance with him. Mitch Blood Green, I got to tell you, he could punch. He's very underrated. He came up out of time with Alex Ramos and Tony Ayala. They all came from that same era. They all turned professional together at that time. Iron Barkley. And they were tough guys. Mitch Blood Green, he ran with the Black Spades, along with Iron Barkley and others. So he was very tough. But Mike Tyson showed his grit. He was hit several times in that fight, but he made it look pretty easy. And that was very impressive because Mitch Blood Green could fight. And like I said, he could punch. I watched him jab the bag in Gleason's gym, and it looked like he was going to tear the bag off the hinge. He punched that hard. You can hear the sound all across the gym. But he wind up getting a chance with this man here, Trevor Berbick. And I was at that fight. And everyone was anticipating it. It was only 2 rounds of boxing, but Mike Tyson wound up knocking him out with a beautiful short left hook in the second round. You had Angelo Dundee in the corner of Trevor Berbick. Lee Black was also in that corner. But it didn't make a difference because Mike Tyson would hit him so hard that Trevor Berbick would get up and fall down several times. Mills Lane was the referee in that corner, in the ring, and he stopped the fight. This was one of the most anticipated fights in many years because everyone wanted to see this young phenomenon and see whether or not he could win the title or not. Was it too soon? Because Mike Tyson had just turned 20 years old. Here you have the tail of the tape. You have their fight records. Trevor Berbick and Mike Tyson. Here you have a typo, 1983. He turned professional in 1985, so that's a typo. Now here you can see his record. 27 no losses with 25 knockouts. Now the 2 distance fights were James Quick Tillis and Mitch Blood Green. They went 10 rounds. And if you look here, Trevor Berbick, 36 bouts, 31 wins, 4 losses, with 1 draw with 23 knockouts. And he took the title away from Pinklin Thomas. This was March 22nd, 1986 in Las Vegas. By the way, I was at that fight as well, with Trevor Berbick and Pinklin Thomas. So when Mike Tyson